I'm Rick from Cartridge Classic Cars. On this video, we're back on this 1970 Challenger RT convertible. On this video, we're going to be installing the main floor, the toe pans, the trunk floor, the full trunk floor. We'll put the trunk drop-offs on, and then we're going to install the 4-speed shift tunnel and some of the spare tire mounts for the convertible, which would be slightly different than would be on a hardtop Challenger or Cuda. So stay tuned for that. This is going to be a shorter video. If you want to see more of an in-depth process, go back and check out some of my other videos on e-body cars, Barracudas, and we've done floor pans on Challengers also. So saying that, we're gonna just we already have all the parts completely prepped. We stripped them down in the sandblast cabinet. The owner wants everything put on this car in bare metal, and then we're gonna put epoxy over that to control everything to our specifications. So all that's been done off camera. We're gonna start the install process. After it's in bare metal, we did add weld through primer everywhere we know we are going to be welding on. You'll see we are going to have weld through primer on the center of the bottom of the floor pans. That's for a future install on subframe connectors. We are not worried about right now. But at the end of this video, hopefully from the firewall to the rear of the car, the whole floor of this Challenger should be complete, and we should be able to move on to the next step. So stay tuned, let's get to work.
So to catch you up on all the work that was done off camera, all these parts were already test fit in the car one time. We screwed them down, we put them exactly where they want to go, adjusted them while they're in the e-coat phase. Then what I do at the bottom of these floor pans and all the parts like this, I'll come through and I'll trace everywhere there's a cross member, the torsion bar support, the frame rails for the back pans, and the rear rails for the back trunk. I'll trace those out with a paint marker, and then what we can do is, as we're pulling the parts apart, I'll make notes on all these different panels and everything else on where we're going to have to drill the holes and to put our MIG rosette holes in them. So you could see this pan's already pre-drilled. Once everything's pre-drilled, I'll add these parts to our large sandblast cabinet, which you could see this floor pan fits in that sandblast cabinet. Everything that we're doing here was all done in the sandblast cabinet. It makes things a lot more efficient to just be able to sandblast this down. It keeps everything a lot cleaner, keeping the dust in the cabinet, and it really now gets everything to the bare metal in a minimal amount of time, where we can go through where we knew our markings were, and then we'll add our weld through primer. So this will accept and keep all the areas that are going to be between two panels as we're welding to stop them from rusting while still giving a good quality weld. So that's the idea behind everything that we've done off camera, to just kind of keep it where, you know, we don't have this video that's 3 hours long of all the prepping of all these parts and all that. So you can see we are going to use anywhere that's going to reach this resistance spot welder. This is going to be more ideal as far as not burning through the weld through primer. We don't have to clean up the welds, and it replicates what would have been done from a factory style setting on assembling these cars. What I'm doing is I am installing the floor pan first, which you saw we got everything fit in place, and what we need to do, we need to install these seat brackets that hold the supports for the seat. So what we did, we used a spot welder on the outside seat brackets because that's going to hold the floor to the car itself, since they're already welded to the rockers. And then the inside ones, you saw we just put bolts through everything to just make sure everything's aligned and held in place, and then we'll come back through what I'm doing right now one time and go with the whole resistance spot welder and just weld up all these brackets. We will have to get the very front of these seat inner brackets on the top with the MIG welder, because the resistance welder with our extension here doesn't fit. But now that we're done with that, we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to the back of this floor pan. I try not to weld any parts if we can help it until all the parts are assembled, just in case there's any issues. However, I know the floor pans and these rear toe pans went in one place. Also, the toe pans sit over this main floor pan. So the big problem there is we need to weld behind it. So we are going to weld the last 4 inches of this rear seat pan, knowing that we can clean them up, put the weld through primer on it, let it dry, and now you could see we are going to install the rear toe pans. Doing so, we're going to use a monkey on the stick, which is a jack that's going to push the toe pan back against the frame rail. I think that's the hardest part of this whole floor pan install job, is just getting everything cinched down tight, one to the rockers, then to all the frame rails below, the cross members, all that stuff, and then back down on these rear frame rails. You really want the tight gaps. That's what's very nice about the spot welder, is it also uses pneumatic pressure to squeeze while it's throwing current through the welder to also weld at the same time. With the MIG welder, we obviously don't have that option. So what we're going to do, we're using tech screws, self-tapping screws. What I do, you see I am pre-drilling all the screw holes, and that's going to just stop them from snapping a lot more. It's not a big deal. If you use the self-tapping screws and the big frame rails, sometimes they'll actually snap, and then we got to come back through with a belt sander and grind them down. Right now, I'm going ahead and I'm going to weld up the firewall to the floor pan. Going back to the beginning of the video, when I first installed the main floor pan, I do try to align this area first before anything else. It's just a curvature that gets a little bit harder to line up, and they didn't line up from the factory. We've seen a bunch of factory cars that do not look very good, but what I go to do, while the floor pan's not cinched down to anything else, I'll take a bunch of vice grips and I'll clamp them all the way through, pushing and prying on it. And once that's lined up, then I can work my way towards the back of the car and, get everything else screwed down tight in place, And then what I'm going to do now that everything is not moving, I come back through and I'm welding in the same process that I usually went around installing and tech screwing everything in place. So you saw right there, I started again on the firewall to the lower floor pan with the spot welder anywhere that can reach, and then now we'll come back through with the MIG welder and we're going to start on the torsion bar support. What I do, I start in the center of the torsion bar support and I'm working my way out. I'm following about the same spots that the factory would have put the MIG welds, or it would have been spot welds from the factory, but I'm going to use the MIG weld and we'll come back through and clean it up with a belt sander and try to make it look as clean as possible. You could also see I am using about 3 times as many welds as the factory would have used in the same exact spots. Again, I just want to make these cars a lot stronger. And then right here, I'm coming back through and I know they just packed seam sealer in this joint right here, but what we're going to do, we're going to weld this one solid. It's a high stress area on these cars, and I feel like just adding a MIG bead in there is going to be a lot better as far as strength, sealing it out, and just making the car all around a better quality build. You won't notice either if you come back through it once you put the seam sealer in it. So that's something I usually do on most of these cars, is seal up that area and weld that area solid on the Mopars at least. Now that we're done welding, we're going to come back through, we're going to start using the belt sander. For the most part, I'm using 80 grit on the belt sander, and this is going to be the first round of cleaning up all the MIG welds. The only problem with putting more MIG welds in it is it does take a little bit more time to clean up the prepping of the holes and everything else. But again, this is the stuff you won't see on other builds, or when the car's all said and done, but knowing that this car is going to be a lot better quality and a lot stronger, and that's what we're really striving for here, to build the best quality cars and do the opposite of cutting corners. We actually want to add more to this car, more value, more rigidness, better handling as far as being quiet, creaking, and everything else. And that's the stuff you won't see, but we can be proud of when it's all said and done. So now that the floor pan is cleaned up with the belt sander, we'll come back through and we'll use a surface prep disc and finish off this panel, but we're going to wait till the very end of the car to finish doing that with the surface prep disc and the DA sander. We're going to turn our attention to one of the only used parts going on this car, and that's a shifter tunnel. So the owner provided this, and we cut it off another floor pan on a different section he had, and we did sandblast that too. We are going to put this on the car. You could see we did test fit it. These 4-speed shifter tunnels, they just basically fit almost in place perfect where the floor has its indentations and curvatures in it. Once I know where that's going to go, you could see we perimeter traced the 4-speed tunnel out. Then we marked it with tape on where we're going to overlap it. The factory did just stitch weld these in a couple little areas. We are going to go ahead and put some MIG rosette holes on the overlap pieces. I found that holds them down really good. And then what we're going to come back through, I'm going to tack up all the perimeter corners just to make sure everything's flush, everything fits in there really nice. And then we'll come back through, and I am going to perimeter weld this whole 4-speed tunnel the same as I did the firewall to floor pan solid. So that's going to make it a lot stronger. A lot of these factory floor pans, when I get these cars in for restoration and everything else, you can actually see where they're pulling up on a lot of areas and putting stress on the floor. And most of those small 1/4-inch stitch welds that the factory did, they really start breaking. Knowing the owner is going to drive this car and possibly, I won't say abuse it, but he's going to have a heavy foot on this car, and he's already had issues with this car separating and having issues from the factory from his driving style. We'll go ahead and make everything on this car as strong as we can. Same thing on this shifter hump. So what we should be able to do here now, we should be able to, by perimeter welding everything, adding this extra piece of metal, it should actually make this floor section even a little bit stronger. Again, it's the little touches like these, I feel, that make these cars that come out of this shop more of a solid build platform and a higher quality, and that's what we're striving for here. Now that the 4-speed shift tunnel hump is complete, we are going to turn our attention to the rest of the brackets on the main floor area, and that will wrap up as far as this main floor section on the car, and we can turn our attention to the trunk pan. So what we're going to do, we're going to put these side support brackets on this car. These are just stitched in place. We did weld them back in the factory holes that we did drill a couple MIG weld or rosette weld holes in them just to make them a little bit stronger. And then now I'm putting on the rear seat front mounts that the seat will fold down in on the convertible. As you can see, there's 2 seat brackets. So in the convertible cars, you had the factory coupe ones that would have been run down the assembly line. As these, the bottom of this floor would have been the same, whether it's a coupe or convertible. That's why we're using regular Challenger parts here. But then what they did, they stitched in these seat brackets, which are the same seat brackets that would have been from a hardtop right in front of it, I guess to make room for the convertible top. I'd like to see one of these cars. I didn't strip this car down with the top, the rear seat, and compare it to a normal Challenger to see the exact differences and why they moved the brackets forward, but it's just something we are going to put back together exactly like it would have came. We are now putting in the center console rear bracket, welding that in completely. And then the final piece on this main floor section is the wire loom running up the driver's side. This was also a part that we took off the original Challenger and we are going to put back on along with the center console bracket. So most of the smaller brackets here did come off the car itself, and we were able to save them to completely reuse them. The aftermarket does work just as well, so if you can't save your pieces for your Challenger, they look almost exactly the same. Same thing with the 4-speed shift tunnel. We did reuse this one. Like I said, there is some minor pitting from the sandblast cabinet in it. I think a brand new shift tunnel would have been the way to go. The owner wanted to reuse this one, so we pick and choose our battles on what we recommend. I think when it's all said and done, it's such a small detail that no one will see, but I'm staring at these cars for hours upon ends as we're welding and putting them in, and just thinking how we always can make these cars better in the long run. So moving our attention, the complete main floor pan is done, and we are now going to turn everything onto the trunk pan. You can see what we're going to do. We need to install the gas tank straps for this trunk pan on the Challenger first. I am going to do this off the car, as one, I can easily measure them a lot better, make sure everything's exactly where it needs to go, and then we could spot weld them on. You can see we just run it right down. We added the weld through primer on this trunk pan just like the rest of the parts. You can see all the MIG rosette holes are drilled in it, and I will start clamping this trunk pan in place. Now, saying that, if you've seen other installs on Challengers of mine, you could see a lot of times I will take the spot welder and run right up the frame rails with the spot welder, doing the same process, and it does save a bunch of time and effort. With this car though, we did keep the wheelhouses, so the spot welder, when it runs up the frame rail, once we hit that top deck filler area and the wheelhouses, the spot welder won't reach anymore. So then now it's going to look really weird, being that you have half spot welds and then half of them will be MIG welds. So we try to keep aesthetics in mind too, knowing that I think the trunk pan, we don't want anything to stand out. So we can come back through, we're going to just MIG rosette weld this whole trunk floor down the whole frame rails, not even bring the spot weld in there. Saying that, I have had owners in the past tell me that they wanted to put fake, we'll call it fake, it's called a single side spot weld, where we could almost replicate a factory spot weld in certain areas that we can't reach. It doesn't count for any structure, being it's only single sided, that it's got very minimal holding to it. But what I can do on a trunk pan that I know the owner does really care about and just doesn't want to make it look like it's been removed is we can MIG weld this whole trunk pan. We can come back through, clean it all up really smooth, get everything looking really good in the main weld phase, and then I come back through with a single side and I can just reach and put my spot welds in the factory locations and spacing apart, where when you look at it, it really looks exactly like it would have been from the factory. And we try to, on certain cars, on the Concours stuff and everything, we do try to replicate that as best as possible. And it's not that we're trying to confuse anyone, we're just trying to tribute what the factory would have done. And then behind the scenes, we're hiding all the structure and the strength in the car with all the MIG welds. Now that the trunk floor is completely welded up and cleaned up, it was easier to reach those welds on there, and that's why we finished that area. We're going to go ahead and install these trunk drop-offs. Saying that, I did make sure everything prior to this was test fit and everything was good before we went and welded the trunk floor on. That is really important, to test fit as many parts as you can, just so there's no issues down the road. Some of these parts that we don't show on the video have been test fit multiple times. They've been worked, they've been pulled and pried. A lot of these aftermarket parts, they will need some pulling and prying. You could see though, in the grand scheme of things, they fit really well. I believe everything on this car was AMD, and that, I believe, for these Challengers is the way to go. I'm not sponsored by them. I just feel we do use these parts all the time, and I stand behind them. They are quality. They work really well. Their stampings look almost identical to almost every part that we do replace. And realistically, versus trying to repair what would have been left on this car is not worth it, and it would have taken so much longer in the grand scheme of things. Now that the trunk drop-offs are welded on, you can see we took the spot welder across the back where we could reach really well. We went through all that, and now we are going to go ahead and put on the spare tire holder, which is going to be different on a convertible. You can see it's a flat piece and comes back a little bit further, and then we are also mounting the spare tire jack on the side of the car. You can see the top portion of the spare tire jack is stayed on the outer wheelhouse. We are going to do some work on the outer wheelhouse down the road, so we will have to change that, but that will be another video for the time. You can see right now the car's in its tape phase, and what we did, we first used wax and grease remover just because we were working on this car for so long. Then we blew everything out. We're obviously in the paint booth, everything's taped up. After we put some more weld through primer on certain areas I know we are going to have to address in the future, and now we are going to add 2 coats of Omni MP 172 black epoxy. We are going to wait a 15 to 20 minute flash period between each coat, and realistically, the epoxy primer, I feel, is a non-negotiable in the restoration world. You apply this over bare metal, it's waterproof, and it stops everything from rusting and gives you a good base foundation. So everything we do on these cars, on the high quality build, I always try to sell the owners on doing the epoxy to make sure it gets in everywhere possible. So let's wrap up this video and close it out for some final thoughts.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up this video on the main floor pan, the toe pans, the trunk pans, and all the brackets that go with them that install on the 70 Challenger RT convertible. I gotta say, working on a convertible is a lot more, it's comfortable, and I like it a lot better for the filming aspect, standing up and just cleaning the welds. Everything on this car made it a whole lot easier to do this floor pan, as you could see even right now. So looking around this car, you could see we did kind of push the epoxy. We went full force and worked on this thing till the job was done. The main thing is it is very humid here in North Carolina. We had storms for over a week straight, and we really didn't want anything here rusting at all. I know we took a big swing at the car and did a lot of work in a shorter amount of time. One, it's more efficient on the owner, and we got about as much work as we can get done to seal the car in epoxy in that timeline that we're shooting for. So the good thing about it, we hit a good stopping point as far as this video and everything else, where most of the car is brand new as far as the floor pan minus the seat, the rockers, the torsion bar, and the rear frame rails, and it really does look good underneath. You saw also underneath, we did leave the area for the welded US car tool subframe connectors we are going to install in the future. I don't like to put those, any subframe connectors in, really sometimes until the car comes off the frame jig, but at least until the body, the doors and everything are aligned, just in case we do have to change anything. I also did not weld the wheel houses to the trunk floor. You could see we did add weld through primer around here, and we will weld that on after we test fit the quarter panel. Same thing with the trunk latch support there. That's all added weld through primer, so we don't have to take the epoxy primer off the car and redo it. But everything in this floor pan with the 4-speed hump, that is done. It is finalized. I know I do over weld some of these parts, the brackets, the rear seat brackets and everything else. I like to build these cars a little bit stronger. And same thing with all the spot welds we put in here. I do put a lot more spot welds, MIG welds, whatever we're gonna call them. I mean, even with the spot welds right here, usually something like this will have about 3 spot welds in the floor bracket. You could see we got 10 in each one. I just like these cars to hold together unless we get some kind of request that the owner wants the car completely factory and we're trying to do a concourse restoration. This car is not one of them. I know the owner has expressed his desire to take this car again to a drag strip and have fun with it. That's why we are adding some frame stiffening connectors and everything else on this car. That was another thing that I sold the owner on. The brand new floor pan minus the damage on the floor pan was it's going to be easier to weld in a subframe connector on a brand new floor versus trying to blow through on a sandblasted floor that just already has little pinholes in it and everything else. So I'm really glad. I think this was the right call to do everything brand new. It looks really good in the epoxy primer, and it really is going to save in the bodywork phase of this car. You can see I also do weld the front seams. We went over that. You know, obviously there's going to be seam sealer there, but again, that's an area I've seen a lot of these Mopars, factory cars come here, and you can actually see daylight when we pull out the seam sealer, and there's 2 spot welds holding it in. That right there, I think, makes it a lot stronger. We know moisture is not going to come from the backside, and then the owner could just put a little seam sealer over it and it'll look almost just like a or he could smear it with the factory looking seam seal and you won't even tell the difference. So that about wraps it up on this car. If you like this kind of stuff, please stay tuned. We got some more videos on this car. On the next video for this convertible, we are going to be working on the cowl panel, the inner fenders, and the engine bay area. You could see on this video that the cowl panel was already sandblasted, and we did epoxy prime the underside to prep it, because what I like to do is prep, obviously, the lower cowl and the upper cowl, the inside where we can't get to them, in the epoxy primer. So when we weld it up, then we can just spray the perimeter. So that's the future video on this car, that will be another shorter video. Maybe we'll do some door skins on that time frame too on that video, and we'll see what else we can do. Like I said, we're going to do this car in condensed version of the video. A lot of work got done in a short amount of time on this video. I'm just trying to show you what the shop can do, and if you have an e-body, what it can look like, how it starts, and what it ends up when it's all said and done. So please check out our Facebook page for earlier updated pictures on this car. There's other pictures that I get really detailed on all the work that we did to this car and other cars, some that we don't film on the YouTube channel. So that's Carthage Classic Cars on Facebook. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It does help us out and get the word and message out on what we're doing here. So I'm Rick from Carthage Classic Cars, and we'll see you on the next video, either on this car or another one in the shop. Stay tuned.